Welcome, everybody. It's Larry Johnson for another episode of Eight Principles Voices. I have with me today a wonderful young lady, Bekah Bowman, who does something that I wasn't even aware of till I learned about it. And so I'm going to share it with you today. She's going to share it with you today, a little bit about our background and the great work that she does. Um, and real irony of ironies, we live in a world of Zoom. Well, her work is actually what, a mile and a half from my office. So there you go. You never know what's going to happen. So welcome, Bekah.
Thank you. Really glad to be here.
So you are currently the executive director at CASA, and we're going to go into what that is in
Mhm.
a moment. But I noticed that before you were the executive director, you were managing volunteers.
Mhm.
So, and that's a pretty interesting job. And I want to talk about that for a moment. Um, what made you want to do managing volunteers? In other words, persuading people to do things for which you have no direct control over. So, what was the motive for that?
Wow. I've never been asked that question before, so I've got to think about it for a second. My career history is working with people who volunteer their time and being able to work with people who are there because they really, really care about whatever the mission is. There's not a paycheck involved, there's not benefits involved. They're there, they're showing up because they want community and they want whatever that culture is offering and the mission. And I don't know, I really have enjoyed over several years working with volunteers because of that. And yeah, at CASA, I was a volunteer manager at CASA of Southwest Idaho before the director position, and just loved meeting people from all walks of life, all ages, who are really passionate about things that I'm passionate about, which are, children and making sure that they can thrive and grow in safe, loving homes. So that's been a fun ride for me.
So, can you tell us what CASA stands for, or is it an acronym?
It is an acronym. Yes, it's Court Appointed Special Advocate. So it is a role that the judge appoints to a child protection case, and the judge appoints our program, and then we recruit and train and support volunteers who serve as CASAs, as Court Appointed Special Advocates.
So, now I'm going to go big and then go small again. I understand
Yeah.
that you are one chapter, one unit, one whatever of a much larger organization nationally. Is that correct?
Well, so our CASA programs are independent. So we are our own nonprofit. We raise money, we recruit, we do all those things on our own. There is a national CASA organization that we pay membership dues to, and we're able to get our logo from them, some additional training, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And in the state of Idaho, we have seven CASA programs broken up by judicial district. It varies across the nation. It could be a CASA program for each county. It could be, yeah, it just kind of varies depending on how the state chops it up.
Now, do you does the organization sponsor conferences that you go to or anything?
They do have a national CASA conference. Our team has never been able to make it there, but they do have one that they host around the US.
Okay, well, I'm just curious how
Mhm.
this works.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
court appointed special advocate, correct?
that's right.
Okay.
Yep, good job.
I always thought that children had legal representation in a situation like this, but this is not what you're telling me. This isn't what you're doing. That's what I'm trying to say.
Mhm.
So, what specific role do these volunteers play that say legal counsel would not?
Sure. So if you think about somebody who's got an attorney, um, the attorney does what what the party they're representing wants them to do. And maybe it would be easier for me to take you back to our origin story in Seattle. Judge David Sokup, he was presiding over a child protection case, and he's kind of, the story's told, he's looking out into the courtroom and he's realizing every party has somebody to speak for them, but the child's there was really nobody there speaking for the child's best interest. And so he decided to create this role. And from the very beginning, it was a volunteer position. And our role is to come in and really look at best interest. That's the key phrase. So, we might not be advocating for what the child wants in certain circumstances. We're at the whole child. So we're looking at how they're doing in school. How are they doing in the foster home or in whatever placement that they are in? How is mom or dad doing? Are they working their case plan? Are they working toward goals? Does it look like they could reunify with their kids? Are they pretty disconnected and not working that case plan? And it's looking like we maybe need to encourage the judge to think toward, adoption or guardianship or some other permanency plan. And we bring all of these facts that we kind of gather throughout the month or throughout several months into a report for the judge to say, here's how this child's doing and across every aspect of their life. And here's some recommendations that we would make.
All right. So then, who comes to you and asks for your service?
So we get appointed by the judge.
Okay.
A child has to be brought in to care. So let me just start. Yeah. So let's just say a child has experienced neglect or abuse, abandonment, something like that. And it's been determined that they need to be brought into the child protection system. And they go into the first hearing. It's called a shelter care hearing. And the judge hears what has happened and determines at that time whether the child goes back home or the child remains in under child protection. At that point, they might go into a foster care home, for example. The judge will appoint our program at that point, and then we take that case and we assign a volunteer and we supervise and support that volunteer as they work the case.
Oh, okay.
So people don't walk into our door and ask for our services. We only serve kids who are under the child protection system.
So, how long do these assignments tend to be?
Well, I actually just was running a report for National CASA, and it looked like our average is 22 months.
Wow.
And of course, kids can be in care much, much longer and some cases end much sooner, but that's our average across several hundred cases. So yeah, it's a commitment. We ask our volunteers to be ready to commit for the entire time that child is in care because we see well, first of all, that child's pulled out of the only thing that they know, the only normal that they know. And we looking in know it's not safe and they need to be removed. But that child's traumatized by that removal. And then they're brought into a home that's got strange smells, different kinds of hot dogs, just different. And
Even the
um,
most significant thing like that can be a major
exactly.
stressor to a child.
Absolutely.
Where's
And,
my
we do
Oscar
see
Mayer? You know,
I know, right? Hot dog brands matter.
they matter.
Um, and then we see a lot of turnover, unfortunately, with caseworkers and with foster parents. And so what can happen as a child is in care for, say, the 22 months average time, they're seeing several different homes, several different caseworkers, possibly several different schools. And so there's nobody really consistent in their life. And so we tell our volunteers, be ready to jump in at the beginning and stay all the way through, because when we get to that end, sometimes you are the only person who can link everything together. And so that's incredibly important when we're trying to fill gaps and we're trying to make big decisions like where this child should live for the rest of their life.
It is. So what's the age range that you deal with? You're minors for sure, but what's the
Mhm.
age range that you deal with?
0 to 18. And we actually do also serve a few kids past 18 because there is such a thing called extended foster care. And that's determined case by case basis. If a child is aging out but still really needs some of those supports, they can stay in for a few years longer. So we do have a couple of those, but really, yeah, 0 to 18, we're across the entire spectrum.
Wow. Wow. Well, everyone loves a story. So could you, I mean, without the names, can you give us an
Mm.
example of a real success story that you had? Something that maybe started out not so well, but then ended up quite remarkably. I mean, you've got to have some.
Mm. I do. I have lots of little nuggets of ones, and we do have to be very careful because it's child protection. It's very confidential, and we're not allowed to share a lot of these stories. But there's a few that we've been able to share. One of we had a little guy who was in elementary school, and he just did not he was our CASA went to go visit him at school and learned that not only is he having to sit out from PE and from recess because he had really um, out of control asthma and nothing to help prevent
The
an
attacks.
attack. He was sitting out of PE and recess, and he was having some behaviors, which no wonder this poor little guy is not able to run out his energy. And on top of that, he was getting pulled out of school multiple times a week to go outside of the school to go to counseling or to other therapies, but they weren't in-house, they were out in the community. And so
Right.
he was really missing a ton of
Always
school.
coming and going. No.
Lots of back and forth. Yeah. Lots of time in the car, just not the way that you want a 7-year-old child to spend their days. And so our CASA was able to actually, we're not allowed to go into a doctor and I mean, we can't be like a guardian, right? But we can get the materials to the people that need to sign them and get them back. And our volunteer was in there getting the permission slip from the school with the medications sheet to get the inhaler from the grandma to, all of the things, all the logistics that needed to happen. In the meantime, she found out all the clothes that he'd had were in a trash bag that had gotten wet and they were all moldy and he didn't have any clothes. And so she zipped over to one of our partners, the wardrobe, got an order together. And within a week, she had rescheduled, she had assisted in getting that inhaler to the school so they felt comfortable letting him play PE and go out in recess. She got him a brand new wardrobe of clothes that fit him well and were nice. And then she was able to connect him to resources that were actually within the school to be able to get really appropriate counseling and support and therapies pushed into the school. So he wasn't missing 3 days a week. He was only getting pulled out for 20 minutes, a couple times a week, for example. But it was all right there. And he told her that he was so excited about playing PE and he was going to be a professional basketball player someday. And so he was very excited about getting to practice his hoops. But I just thought that just gives you a glimpse of the power of a CASA in a child's life.
Things that most of us simply take for granted. Um, that whole idea of not having to remove him from the property repetitively, but it was all
Mhm.
there. That
Mhm.
provides so much more. And then I'm trying to wrap my heads around taking my my belongings around in a plastic bag. That had to be
Mhm.
so demoralizing in a sense of
Yes.
literally a sense of sort of homelessness. I mean, just kind of I'm just kind of wandering around with my stuff here, wherever I have to go at the moment. Um, and then
Absolutely.
you said it
Yeah.
got wet, and then the moisture ultimately spoiled all the clothes. And oh, how pathetic is that? So how long was
Yeah.
the young man in your care?
Oh, I'd have to go back and look at that to be sure on the date. I don't know that I've got a firm timeline on there. I think he was probably a couple years in care with us, but
Well,
yeah,
that's a significant length of time. And you did say that
it
the
is.
main is 22 months. Um,
Mhm.
I didn't think it would be um, that long. So tell us about some of the excuse me, some of the challenges you face, and I want to focus on them in a couple of different areas. First, in terms of balancing, I presume you have contact with the judiciary. I presume you have contact with law enforcement, and I presume you have contact with parents. So, how do all those things interplay in the work you do?
Yeah, so if you can imagine, we're going to make a little spider web graph. We've got the child right here in the center, and we're going to draw out every single party or individual that relates to that child. And we get a court order that allows us to speak to any of those people and gather information from them. So one of the main jobs of a CASA is that um, independent investigation piece. So we're constantly in collaboration and communication with the health and welfare department, with the caseworkers. We are talking with really anybody who's part of the child's life. We want to speak to them and get their take on how things are going and check in. So foster parents, biological parents. Um, we yeah, sometimes we do, if it's a juvenile, a youth we're serving is in juvenile detention, for example, we're speaking with whoever is over their case there. And we're writing reports and communicating to the judge every time we're in a hearing, speaking on behalf of the child's best interest. So all of those, that just needs to be a continual communication and checking in the entire time a child's in care. So our volunteers might, we give them an email address, so they email, they might make phone calls, they might go in person and visit. But they always visit the child at least once a month in person to make sure that they're doing okay, get to hear from them, because we want the child to also be able to speak up for what their wishes are. We do take those into consideration as we're advocating for best interest. Um, but yeah, and our most significant severe cases often are staffed at, a multidisciplinary team, MDT, in different counties. And so that is where you see all those parties come together, from law enforcement to all the different parties that kind of cover that child, and um, are able to talk about some of the really complicated details and be able to collaborate better as a team.
So you are a nonprofit.
We
Um,
are. Mhm.
does the court pay you for this?
Nope, we do this for free. We are appointed attorneys from the county. And so there is a cost there, because we, as the CASA, have an attorney speaking on behalf of us in the court. But yeah, no, our volunteers, our staff, everybody, we are free to these services are free to the child protection community. And we're out there fundraising and getting support from the community for this.
Well, so they're free to the beneficiaries, not to the people providing them. Let's get that clear. These things aren't free.
Thank you. Yes, that's a very good clarification. They
Even
are not free for us to do. They're quite expensive, but we
even,
provide it for.
even managing phalanx of volunteers has its costs, even though the
Mhm.
volunteers are doing so without direct compensation. So, tell me
Correct.
about your funding formula. Um, uh, Public grants, private grants, individual donations, and then also where you'd like to move in that regard, or where you'd like to expand. Because obviously,
Sure.
I assume that
Mhm.
you could expand if you had more resources. Is that true?
It could. And I'll be honest, Larry, we're operating with a triage plan right now. So there are some kids, some youth who don't get our services, and they really need them. But we don't have enough funding and volunteers yet. So we're young. We started in 2016. We're getting our big kid pants on now, but we've been very young, and we came into a county, or a judicial district, that is just exploding and growing. And
It
so
is.
it was like this baby program had like this much need. We couldn't grow with the need. It was just there. And so the originally, at the beginning, it was really very heavy on grants. And I will say we still are very heavy on grants. But we have significantly improved in corporate donors, and some foundations, and also individual donors in the community who just really believe in what we do. And they sign up for our Circle of Hope membership, where they give whatever designated amount they want to give each month. And that really helps us know we've got this to depend on, and we can make sure these things happen as a result. So that has been a huge blessing. And we hope to just continue to grow that Circle of Hope membership, because those are kind of our favorite.
Yeah.
Those are our favorite kind of partners, because they're real people who really care. We get to connect with them. We get to bring them into the story. We get to share the mission with them, and really show them that their money is making a significant impact. I mean, it's not just these kids they're impacting, it is generational, because these kids, we see a cycle of this kind of trauma. Parents learn in that they repeat, and then the kids repeat. And we're able to jump in there and show these kids a different way forward. And often we can help the parents find a different way forward too. And so that is really awesome when we can see families heal. So I just think, man, if anybody cares about the community, CASA is for you, because we're making significant differences, a dynamic impact to our community as a whole.
So I think a common thought, and I'm going to test this with you,
Oh boy.
that most of the young people that you assist are coming from what, semi-impoverished backgrounds, but I suspect that's not the case. What are we talking about here?
Yeah, I do not have exact numbers for you because we don't document that, but I will tell you anecdotally that is not always the case. It's not always the lower income. It is. I tell people, look around your neighborhood. There is some child that either is in child protection in foster care, or should be, because abuse and neglect, I mean, they cross all economic barriers. And yeah, it's a common misconception, I think.
Um, so you're in an area that's really growing. Um,
Mhm.
it's a it's a small government area. We like small government here, and I'm going to suspect that there may be some sort of social pushback for some of this. Is that out there, or is it widely accepted? I'm trying to get an idea of.
Yeah, that's
Ask,
interesting.
the reason I'm asking that question is that can be overcome, but it requires a strategy to do so. And I wonder,
Hmm.
what I mean, if I were to walk down the street down in Caldwell and say, hey, tell me about CASA, and two things, they might say, who's that? And if they do, then what would be their response?
Well, I have found that CASA actually is a very unifying concept across all kinds of backgrounds, belief systems, religions, non-religion. I mean, we're here for the kids. And so it's really hard to be, it's hard to say anything negative about how we show up for kids, right? So I, when I think about our volunteers that sign up, I'm telling you, we have people from all different walks of life. And people get it. Like we are jumping in to make sure these kids have what they need to heal, to thrive, and to become productive members of the society, of our communities, to grow up and be able to give back and pour their gifts and their resources and their talents back into their community. And I don't know, I've just found that to be a very unifying mission.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good that you get that kind of support from the community.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
so maybe you can't answer this, but you can make a guess at it. Which do you think is a bigger constraint now? The availability of volunteers or sufficient revenue?
The availability of volunteers.
Okay.
I can answer that 100%. Yeah, it is the availability of volunteers. It's a hard role, and I don't want to sugarcoat it, because you're walking into very, very broken circumstances, addiction, mental health problems, um, really awful abuse, neglect, things, that are just not fun to jump into. And on top of that, you are dealing within a system that feels quite broken and does sort of have a lot of hangups in it. And so it can get frustrating. And I'm grateful for the people who are willing to step into really dark spaces, because that's when we bring light to those spaces.
I love that.
And if our kids don't have people stepping up for them, I tell my volunteers all the time, you are frustrated right now because you feel like you're not getting anywhere, but imagine if you weren't here. Like what would that hole be for those kids? So, yeah, we took 2 steps forward and 5 steps back, but let me tell you, we still took those 2 steps forward. And so it does take some guts to
Hmm.
stick into this and to be here for these kids, but it is worth it. And the people who do, man, it's so awesome to watch the wins and the celebrations. And we celebrate the little tiny things and we celebrate the really big things, because it's all worth it. But yeah, I think it can be, yeah, the load of volunteers we need. I'll tell you right now, we have 76 active volunteers currently working on cases, and we really need 110. So we just have that amount we need to get to, that would allow us to throw our triage plan out the window and make sure every single child has somebody looking out for their best interest.
So, when someone steps up and says, "Hey, I'd like to do this," what's the next step? Is there training, support, vetting? I mean, what sort of procedures?
There is. Yeah, absolutely. So we have a volunteer manager, which is what I got to do before I stepped
Yeah.
into the director role. And we've got a fantastic one, Jordan. She is our volunteer manager. So when you raise your hand, you say, "I'd like to learn more." I first of all would like to point out that we do not pressure anybody to jump in. So if you raise your hand and want to learn more, it is literally going to be an opportunity for you to hear all the details and ask all the questions you want. And we are not going to hound you because we want you to want to be here.
Mhm.
So Jordan will do a discovery
So,
call,
so,
and
so no guilt trips.
no guilt trips, no guilt trips. And you know what? There's lots of ways that people can help kids in foster care. It's a whole spectrum of ways. This is one of them. So Jordan will do a discovery call with whoever might be interested. That, like I said, that's just time for them to get the full rundown of the role, ask whatever questions they might have. At that point, if they say, "I want to move forward for the next step," we do an extensive background check and fingerprinting, and that has to clear in order for them to be able to do the role. We do 30 hours of pre-service training, and that is done every other month. We have a new cohort come through, and they do 30 hours. It's a mixture of in-person, hybrid, and some homework. And then when they're done with those 30 hours and their background check has come back and it is passed and everything's cleared, they get assigned an advocate supervisor. And that advocate supervisor then does onboarding with them. Now, they've had a lot of practice already on what to do with a case, but the advocate supervisor at the onboarding helps them pick the case that they want to serve on and begin. And they'll do their first child visit with them. They do some hearing, some court shadowing. They do just different things to help them feel equipped. And then that supervisor is there for them the entire time. They're checking in with them monthly. They're making sure they have what they need. Our volunteers have what they need to be successful in this role. And they're always there as a sounding board. So we provide training ongoing all year long to our volunteers and to our staff. And our volunteers are our number one thing because we can't be here without them. We serve over 600 kids a year. We could not do that as a small staff. So we invest heavily in our volunteers because they are the heart of our program.
So you say that the typical tenure, well, typical meaning the mean tenure is 22 months, and
Mhm.
you want continuity with the volunteer as much as possible. Um, when a volunteer is done their 22 months, how many people seek to say, "Okay, I'm ready for the next," or say, "Oh, I think I'll."
Many. Yeah, many. We have both, they both go both ways. Some of them are like, "Hey, I came in, I did a case, that was my goal. I think I'm going to go do something else now," and that's fine. And they go and they do that, and they made an incredible difference in that child or that sibling set's life during that case. We have many volunteers who have been with us for 4, 5, 6, since the beginning, years with us and have taken several cases. And some of them take even two or a few cases at a time,
But that
depending on
was
what they have time for.
well, that was my next question was
Mhm.
can they take more than one as a caseload at a time?
Yeah.
And typically, typically, what would be the time commitment for one child through from start to finish, monthly, say?
Right. I love it. You use the quotes because I will just give the disclaimer. We put this out there because it's kind of a typical 8 to 10 hours a month. And I have some volunteers snickering at me in the background. So there are moments where those cases, man, they blow up. And there is so many things to keep track of and be on top of depending on what's happening. But typically 8 to 10 hours a month is what we say. They're going to be doing a child visit every 30 days for about an hour. And then court, depending on which county you're in, it happens every 3 to 6 months. Um, you're writing a report. Sorry, court is every 3 months. You're writing a report every 3 to 6 months, which I always say if it's every 6 months, it's enough time to pass to forget how to do it and have to relearn again. But, and then the rest of your time is really spent emailing and reaching out to all of those parties in the child's life to make sure that you've got you're honed in on how things are going for that child.
Okay. Um, so do you feel, I mean, where you are in Caldwell, Idaho, just outside of Boise, um,
Mhm.
it's a growing place, but it's still a relatively small place. Do you think that you get the support from the community at large that you need or would like to have?
Well, I mean, what did you say when we first talked? I didn't even know CASA existed, right?
Okay.
You had no idea. And you're here, you're in this
Yes.
community.
Yes, I am.
And that is what we're discovering over the last several years. We worked really hard to get out into the community. And when people hear our mission, they they get excited about it. And we do have some really awesome support from the community, but I think we've got a long way to go to really help get the word out there and help people understand who we are and what exactly we do. I mean, best interest advocacy is really hard to explain, in a quick second. It kind of goes over people's heads. So it takes a conversation and those take time. So we're getting there. We're getting out there.
I know the first time we spoke, I was trying to wrap my head around exactly what it is you did. 'Cause,
Yep.
I think most people would just assume that you're looking at a social worker and or a child, at a child for somebody from Child Protection Services and attorneys, and that would be it pretty much, and that it kind of all revolves around that. But you're telling me that something totally different. So this came out of a program in Seattle. A judge did this.
I'm a judge in Seattle. Yeah. He
And how-
started it in, I want to say it was 1977 is what's coming to my mind. It was sometime in the 70s.
okay,
So,
so it's been around a while.
it has. Yep.
So you have a volunteer manager yourself. I know that Stephanie's helping you with the fund development piece. Anybody else on staff?
Yes. We've got now I just blanked on what her title is. Oh my goodness. She's going to laugh at me if she listens to this because she always is like, I don't know. I just do whatever I'm told. She's our compliance and data manager, Angela. And then we have Jenny, who is our program manager. So she oversees all of our advocate supervisors and is the liaison to our courts and to the health and welfare department. And then we have, I'm going to have to name them all: Angelica, Rebecca, Christina, and Jessica. I'm going to get in trouble. Am I forgetting anybody? Advocate supervisors. And then we have Dimitri, who is our case intake coordinator. Oh no, I don't want to miss anybody. Did I get them all? We have a fantastic staff. They show up very passionate and they are there for the right reasons. And I'm so grateful for them because they make magic happen daily.
Well,
So,
it certainly sounds like it. And I say this in all honesty, you seem to be very unaffected by all this because you are in
mm,
difficult situations, and yet I don't sense any cynicism coming through, or sort of, it's at least you're not there yet anyway. Um,
right.
so So how long have you been executive director again?
It has been almost 3 years,
And
getting
prior to
close.
that, you were the volunteer manager.
I was a volunteer manager for 2 years prior to that. So I've been with CASA for almost 5 years.
So then now I this is this position, well, the volunteer management position, was that one fresh out of school, or was there something in between there?
For me,
Mhm.
oh, yeah, no, I look younger than I am. There was lots before that. Yep. Yeah.
So what convinced you to start doing this? I mean, what was it that attracted you?
Well, so it's a little bit of we're going to go down a little bit of a gopher hole if you're okay with that. But
I'm
I
fine.
was okay. But um, I had gone into children's ministry to be a children's pastor, family pastor.
Mhm.
Um, that was back in 2006 and seven. And that was my career. That was where I had my sights set, my experience, my education. And that's what I did for about 10 years. My boys were young. My oldest was almost 5, and my youngest was almost 2 when our family got hit with a really hard reality that our boys they both had a fatal rare disease. And, when you get that kind of news, first of all, you never think you're going to be that family. That's not going to be my parenting journey. Um, it really hit us obviously very hard. And I wound up stepping back from work, from my career, because my oldest, my son Titus, really needed me at home. He needed 24/7 care. And so I did that with Titus, stayed home with Titus and Eli. And a year and a half after we got his diagnosis, he passed away. So it really went through him very quickly. Eli, it was a little bit of a different story because he got an early diagnosis from his brother. And so he wound up starting in a clinical trial that um, basically he gets an enzyme replacement therapy every other week. It's a brain infusion that takes all day long. I mean, we're there for hours. Every other Tuesday, we hop over to St. Luke's for it. And so Titus passed away when he was 6. Eli is going to be 11 this July. And while the disease has definitely progressed and we are definitely in a place where he needs a lot of care, he is, wow, he's just in a totally different place than Titus ever got to be.
Okay.
So that's incredible. But obviously, it took my career trajectory just totally off track. And when I looked to go back into work, I did step into a ministry position coming back in, and it just felt like, you try on your something from your college days and it just doesn't fit your body anymore. It just felt a little bit like that. It was kind of lumpy. That role didn't fit me anymore.
I like that.
Um,
I like that. Lumpy. Yeah.
it was
Lump.
lumpy. I couldn't name it. There's just a lot of grief, a lot of things that come with this story. So I stepped away and I had been writing. I'd been doing freelance writing. I love to write. I had been blogging. I wound up taking a year off of anything and being able to actually write a book. And so I was able to get that published.
Congratulations.
And thank you. And so that was a really incredible journey. And then we made some transitions back to Idaho, which is home for us. We came back home and I wasn't sure what was next. And so my story is that I hopped on Indeed for the first time ever in my life, and I didn't even know if it actually worked, but it did. And there was CASA, and I had never heard of it. And so I started looking into the mission of it. And for me, the only way that my family survived our story is because people came alongside us
Mhm.
and they stepped into our dark places. And I see these kids in dark places and they need people to step in. And that's a mission I can get behind. So it was a volunteer manager position. I'd done that for years in church ministry. I know how to manage volunteers. I know how to encourage and walk alongside them. And so the skills just transferred, and I applied for the position, and I obviously got it. Um, And yeah, and wow, 5 years later, here we are already. So it's been a wild ride, but I really do believe that we are at CASA, we get to be a community that makes a difference in these kids' lives, and we need to do that. So
Well, they are
that's
very
my story.
lucky to have you, very blessed to
Mm,
have you, and
thank you.
kind of moved on to the next level. Well, we've covered a lot of ground here.
We
And
have. You had great questions.
well, thank you. And I especially like how you've made it real for everyone by talking about oftentimes what does it say? Oh, there's a man I know that does men's group work, and and he says, how does it go? Your best work comes from the garden of your wounds, or something like that. But that's not it, but it's
Yeah,
close. All right.
yeah,
So,
absolutely.
and that's certainly the case with you.
Mhm.
If someone wanted to reach out to you or to contact you, how would they do that, Bekah?
Yeah, if they're interested in more of about CASA, they can go to our website. It's CASA of SWIdaho.org. And there's an opportunity, there's a form there on the volunteer tab to fill out. It goes right to Jordan, and she's able to reach out and do that. For me personally, I mean, you can also get to me through that. So just leave a note. I'd like to connect with Bekah, and Jordan will be sure to send that message on to me. But that's probably the easiest and best place.
Okay. Anything else you want to add for the good of the order?
Oh, I just am grateful for the opportunity to talk about it, and to have this kind of longer conversation is really a unique opportunity for me and for CASA. So thank you for giving us the platform, Larry.
Well, you're welcome. My pleasure. You know, everyone, we've been listening to Bekah Bowman, who's the executive director of CASA Southwest Idaho, and something I knew nothing about until recently, and I've grown to really like it. And what you do is great work. Thank you very much for taking your time to do this today.
Thank you.
Well, there'll be another episode next week. I think it is. These are weekly, I think now, and there'll be another a nonprofit, a humanitarian leader that we interview. So until then.